According to my choice, the fate of the nebula would be reversed on the Korean peninsula. At first glance, it looked like a situation where I was in an advantageous position, but I wasn't that comfortable. The constellations are quarreling over the legitimacy of the myths. I seemed to have the option of choosing, but the problem was after the selection. The nebula were sensitive about plagiarism when it came to the resurrection story. In particular, the confrontation between Eden and Vedas was severe. If I chose one side, then the other would completely turn their back on me. I was only a bud who hadn't become a constellation yet. If I refused all of them, they would feel resentment towards me. Many constellations want you to choose quickly. Damn, I was afraid of receiving criticism over the resurrection and becoming a public enemy among the constellations. What should I do? The constellation Queen of the Darkest Spring is mediating the conflict between the constellations. The constellation Queen of the Darkest Spring emphasizes that it is the incarnation's choice. Persephone was on my side. By the way, why was she helping me? Some constellations are dissatisfied with the intervention of Queen of the Darkest Spring. Some constellations are asking for a solution from the Queen of the Darkest Spring. The constellation Queen of the Darkest Spring recommends that the incarnation Kim Dokcha be invited to the constellation banquet. Banquet? After a while, the nebula Eden agrees with the suggestion from the Queen of the Darkest Spring. The nebula Vedas agrees with the suggestion from the Queen of the Darkest Spring. A number of constellations agree with the suggestion from Queen of the Darkest Spring. Regardless of my intention, I felt like my existence was being sold at a low price. I somehow felt empty, and then the Dokubi Yunki appeared in front of me. Sir Dokja! Perhaps he came in a hurry. Yunki was covered in sweat. There is a place you have to go. Where? I will help you get there. I'll prepare it right away. I had a rough idea of where I was going. Based on how nervous Yunki was, the pressure from the constellations must be considerable. It felt like my body was collapsing and being reborn. It wasn't resurrection. It was closer to the soul forming a body. It was a state like a floating ghost, but it was temporary. This is an important meeting. A shirt and suit covered the soul body that didn't have any genitalia. The texture of the cloth felt like it had been created for me. Stories are shining in the distant night sky. The constellation banquet is currently being held. The constellation Queen of the Darkest Spring has invited you to the constellation banquet. The constellation banquet. Along with sponsor selection, it was an event arranged for the constellations of the star stream. I was invited to a banquet where only constellations were invited, despite not yet being a constellation. I looked at the time remaining until I was resurrected. Time remaining, 23 hours, 54 minutes, 12 seconds. 23 hours. It was enough time for a short visit. It was a bit fast, but the place I had to go was obvious. Okay, let's go. It was finally time to visit the constellations. The person who invited you will soon send an envoy. Understood. I wish you a successful debut. Yunki raised a fist with resolute eyes and soon disappeared from in front of me. I looked around the area that was covered with white clouds. I realized that this was one of the tributaries of the Cloud Road. Numerous Dokubis moved along this road to go to other dimensions. You have temporarily left the main scenario area. You must return to the scenario area within 24 hours Earth time. If you don't return in time, you will be disposed of according to the scenario rules. Disposal. The system was really frightening, just like the last time when I went to the underworld. The hidden scenario Constellation Banquet will begin. Hidden scenario Constellation Banquet. Category Hidden. Difficulty Unknown. Clear conditions. Participate in the banquet and have a successful debut. Time limit 24 hours. Compensation 100,000 coins. Favor or dislike from some of the constellations. Failure none. At any rate, there are many scenarios hidden in the star stream. As long as I maintained my heart, I would get more coins than I thought. I saw 4 horses flying in from a distance. The white horses were like a light source as they emitted a white light. They flew with golden wings, and behind them was a golden carriage. There was the symbol of the sun engraved on the outside of the carriage. I recognized the carriage with one glance. Surely this wasn't the sun carriage. Then the presence in the carriage. Hey, get in. I was amazed by the true voice that I heard. It showed that the presence in the carriage wasn't someone huge. Hey, it's okay. This is a symbolic realm, so my true voice is weaker. Get in quickly, I won't eat you. I nervously got into the carriage. If this really was the sun carriage, then the owner of this carriage would probably be the sun god Helios. Eh? You are. I looked at the occupant of the carriage with wide eyes. To be precise, it wasn't an occupant. Only a wine glass filled with delicious red wine floated inside the carriage. I wondered about the situation, and then the wine glass opened its mouth. Don't you recognize me? The Constellation, god of wine and ecstasy, is disappointed in you. I asked in a startled manner. Dionysus? There was a dazzling spark, and the wine glass screamed. Hey, don't call my name so carelessly. I feel good because I'm excited. Why do you look like this? It's due to the probability. This is a good form to save on probability costs. You know, the great star stream is quite strict. In fact, from my point of view, it was better than his true body. No matter how much I had the fourth wall, there was no certainty that I would be in a good state if I saw the body of a constellation. The carriage set off as soon as I sat down. I didn't know why Dionysus was driving Helios' sun carriage, but he seemed to have a reason. Is this the first time you've actually seen me? Nice to meet you. I'm the god of wine and ecstasy. My name is famous in your country. I'm also pleased to meet you. We awkwardly greeted each other and sat in a corner of the carriage. Unlike his usual playfulness, Dionysus didn't say much. Did he have a shy personality? It was unexpected. Well, not all stories were true. The wine glass shook in a worrisome manner every time the carriage jolted. Would it fly in my direction? The liquid seemed to be a symbol of something, and I wondered what it represented for Dionysus. After a while of idle thoughts, Dionysus said, I'm sorry, I was chatting with a goddess I know for a second. It seems you're very busy. It isn't like that. I should proactively manage the girls these days. I didn't know if it was a joke or not. By the way, you're calmer than I expected? I'm still a famous constellation. It isn't the first time I've seen a constellation. That reminds me. Was it last time when I sent you to the underworld? Yes, thank you for that. What thanks? What did you do in the underworld? Huh? I've never seen the queen act so kindly. Trying to protect one incarnation from the nebula? Huh? Perhaps... What, was that it? You told that old lady? His voice was somewhat envious. Dionysus didn't seem to know that I completed Persephone's task. Nothing happened. Hey, don't be shy. Isn't that auntie sexy? If I wasn't a gentleman on the outside. Do you have to say it that way? Isn't the queen of the underworld your mother? There is that theory. Is it fake? I didn't say that. Why are you looking at me like that? Don't you know Olympus? This taboo is nothing. Come to think of it, Olympus was such a place. A paradise of gods who thought with their lower half. Still, this was too nasty. Yes. Speaking of which, did you get my previous message? Stick to my side. I particularly want to give you the story of Bacchus. Oh, why is your expression like that? No need. I hurriedly shook my head. Dionysus was one of the 12 high-ranking constellations of Olympus, but the story of Bacchus? I get it. Look at this person. Are you comparing it with the stories from Eden or Vedas? No, that's not it. Hey, is it because you don't know anything? Do you know what will happen if you receive the story of the resurrected Messiah? You'll have to live compassionately your whole life. It's the same after you die, yes? You'll have to live like a priest god, Dionysus shouted loudly. Huh? Don't you know the great Bacchus story? How great the Bacchus story is in contrast. Don't you know my goddesses? The goddesses who ripped apart homosexuals? Dionysus jumped with surprise. Yes, you can spend frenzied days and nights with them. I can give you an endless refill of wine. Have you heard of the Olympus orgies? Do you know Aphrodite? If you want, I will invite her. The constellation, goddess of love and beauty, is looking at the god of wine and ecstasy. Let's just pretend I didn't say that. What do you think? It doesn't appeal to me. The Dionysus wine shook uneasily. That reminds me. An angel of Eden says that you are interested in sodomy. I don't know who spread it, but ignore that girl. I want to know the real reason why you came to see me. What are you talking about? It is to get you to join our nebula. Is that really all it is? Dionysus was silent for a moment. The wine glass was still for a while before making a circle in the air. You noticed quickly. I've heard a lot. Do you want to drink? Drink some of my wine. I don't really like drinking. Well, okay, you're right. In fact, my purpose isn't to take you to Olympus. It was as I thought. He was a god, meaning nothing he said was sincere. It was strange to me that despite all the nebula paying attention to me, one of Olympus's 12 constellations came to pick up one incarnation. Yet Dionysus's next words completely broke my expectations. I'll tell you directly. I hope you don't join Olympus. Huh? To be more precise? Then a terrible explosion occurred. The sun carriage shook like it had been hit by something, and the horses screamed. I turned back and saw wine pouring from Dionysus's glass. Ah, fuck! I was so surprised I pissed. I was afraid to ask what his urine was. I carefully avoided the spilled wine. Damn, it looks like other nebula are looking for you. I looked out the curtain and saw creatures with terrifying presences flying all over the place. They were still far away, and I didn't know what nebula they belonged to, but it was clear they didn't like me. Oh, fuck. I paid a lot to borrow this from Helios. This won't work. Get off here and run the rest of the way. It's just a short run along the cloud road. Here? Wasn't it air? I'll stop them. Go quickly. If you enter the banquet hall, no nebula can touch you. The curtains opened at his words. I looked at the clouds below and gulped. I was a soul. This meant I wouldn't die if I fell. Then Dionysus's voice was heard behind me. Keep this in mind. Don't trust anyone. I leapt out of the carriage as Dionysus laughed. See you again, Incarnation Kimdokcha. I jumped off the carriage onto the road. There was a huge sound behind me, and then a brutal oppression pushed on my body. It was a tremendous force I had never felt before. At least part of the true essence had been descended. Sparks struck like a thunderstorm. I could tell without looking back. The confrontation between Constellation and Constellation had begun. I rushed with all my strength along the cloud road. Debris flew over my head, and I felt the ground cracking. However, I never looked back. How much time had passed? Finally, a huge castle was seen, and the noise behind me weakened. I had reached the entrance of the castle. I came to participate in the banquet. The gatekeeper looked down on me. He seemed to be a low-grade Dokubi dispatched from the bureau. What? I didn't hear about an incarnation coming here alone. Damn it. Maybe it was a mistake to get out of the sun carriage. Maybe that would have been my free pass. At this moment, the inner castle door opened and an unexpected savior appeared. Let him in. He's part of my group. It wasn't Persephone. The constellation I had wanted to see for a long time was waiting for me.